I think we're live. I'm super happy to be here for another episode of Howdy Partner. I'm Mo. I'm going to let Sarah introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a Partner Solutions Architect at AWS.
And then we have three amazing expert guests today from our friends at SailPoint. So, David, do you want to start?
Sure. Howdy, everybody. My name is Dave Bullis. I'm a strategic evangelist here at SailPoint. Really looking forward to this today. And the hat's going to stay on for about 5 seconds, but it seemed appropriate.
Neil?
Yeah, my name is Neil McGlennon. I'm a principal architect in our technology services department. And so I take care of implementations and best practices and things like that, work everything from pre-sales all the way to post-sales and implementation. So happy to be with you guys today, and we're ready to show you some cool stuff.
We're happy to have you. And last but not least, Colin.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Colin McKibben. I am a developer advocate here at SailPoint. I'm part of the new developer relations team that we just started up. And my focus is on creating a awesome developer experience for all of our partners and our third-party developers.
Very cool. So if you're joining us for the first time, I'm going to ask Sarah what Howdy Partner is. Sarah, can you tell the audience what the show is about and why we do this show?
Yeah, so Howdy Partner is developed on showing off our partner products, and it's developer focused, and we're excited to see what SailPoint has to show to us today.
Oh yeah, so if you're new here, if you're technical, if you're a dev or an SA, follow along. We're going to be talking all about event-driven security and identity with SailPoint specifically. So follow along, participate in chat. I think Howdy Partner is all about breaking the fourth wall and having you all interact with us and ask us questions, and we're going to have our expert guest answer them all. If you're non-technical, again, please feel free to follow along and just learn about how to reduce friction in building applications, in particular to identity and security. And yeah, we're going to get started. I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to kind of teach us about event-driven stuff. In particular, she's going to talk to us about EventBridge, which if you followed the show before, you probably know that I'm a big fan of this service. So I expect a lot of questions about EventBridge in particular.
All right, sounds good. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, I'm going to give an introduction on EventBridge, and then we're going to pivot to SailPoint to see how they've integrated with EventBridge for their various use cases. So just an overview. So EventBridge removes the friction of writing point-to-point integrations by letting you easily access changes in data that occur in both AWS and SaaS applications. And with EventBridge, you get a simple programming model where you have event publishers and event subscribers. And this allows you to have a decoupled architecture. And with a loosely coupled architecture, you can independently scale your solution and also reuse your event-driven applications for various use cases. And it's fully managed, so it handles everything from ingestion, delivery, security, authorization, and error handling. And it makes it super easy to build scalable and event-driven applications. And because it is serverless, there's no infrastructure to manage, so you get to focus on your solution and you only pay for the events that you consume. So let's go over a high-level review of the EventBridge architecture. So the first construct on the left side is the event source. And just like the name implies, it's an event source, so it's a source of an event. And this can be any one of our AWS services. It can also include custom applications that you write. And lastly, it can be a SaaS application. And today, so when you use SaaS application integrations, if you look at the core of the picture, there's partner event sources. And this provides a logical connection between the partner system and the AWS account that's integrated with, so that you don't have to worry about cross-account IAM credentials. And at the core of the EventBridge are event buses. So if you're familiar with CloudWatch events, it's similar to that. And you can also create your own custom event buses or create a SaaS event bus for your SaaS application integrations. And then once you have an event bus, you can associate rules with it. So rules allow you to match against values in the metadata of the data that's ingested. And the metadata is in a JSON format. So for example, let's say you have support tickets that trigger an EventBridge solution, then depending on the type of ticket, then you can create a rule for it. And then those rules are routed to a target. And this can be invoking a Lambda function or putting a record on Kinesis data stream, even starting a step function workflow. So there's various use cases for EventBridge. I'll go over a few common ones, and then we can move on to see what SailPoint has done with it. So a few use cases are that you can use it for customer support. So let's say you have a solution that has support tickets and a status of one of those tickets changes. You can trigger EventBridge and start an automated workflow and use machine learning and deploy a sentimental analysis model depending on what you want to do with that data. There's also use cases for security operations, so that in case something happens, the right information is communicated to the relevant groups that need to know. It's also great for business operations because EventBridge will help you understand the access process and operational changes in your solution. It's also great for application monitoring. So if you need to respond quickly to a change in your application performance, you could create a workflow that way. And you can also use it for directory registration and customer data updates. So now that we've learned about EventBridge a little bit, let's see what SailPoint has to say about it.
Oh yeah, so again, like I said, we're talking about event-driven security and identity today, and we have no other than the experts of security and identity from SailPoint here to guide us through what's going on. So David, why don't we start with you? Why don't you tell us a bit about what SailPoint is and kind of get us started?
Awesome. Thanks, Mo. So let me just share up a couple here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. I promise it's not very much slides today. We're talking about SailPoint Identity Security. And what SailPoint Identity Security does for organizations is really three core things. One, provision with confidence. We are talking about giving access at the appropriate time to the appropriate people to cloud applications, on-prem applications, data, infrastructure. When someone joins your company, they need access. We get it. When they move to somewhere else, part of their life cycle, we change access. We get that set up for them too. It protects you at scale. Organizations are changing rapidly, they're growing rapidly, they're divesting, they're moving. All of that's happening at a scale that we've never really, that it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. That's what SailPoint's job is. Cover that. We work for the largest companies in the world. They've got our solutions in there, making sure that they stay secure. And lastly, it's about complying with certainty. Staying secure is super important. It's the most important when you're talking about where's my data. But proving that you're staying secure is also very important to a lot of organizations. So making sure that you comply, making sure that you're following the right security procedures, making sure that the people have the right access, and making sure that all of that's happening in the timely manner, that's also part of identity security, and that's part of what we do here at SailPoint. Now today, we're showing off some of the use cases that come about when you take our solution and you want to do a little bit of cool stuff with it. You want to add a little bit of custom code, you want to add in some custom behavior. This is where Amazon and SailPoint are working together. And AWS EventBridge is giving us the ability to put our events into AWS and then react to them. And there's three use cases we're going to be covering here today. The first is application monitoring with AWS CloudWatch. CloudWatch is an application monitoring solution. SailPoint has an application that needs monitoring. Hooking the two together really just lets us both do what we're really good at. And we're going to show that as the first use case. So you'll see us connecting the two systems up and then using CloudWatch to see when things are happening with SailPoint. The second sample use case is around employee security reviews. This is a full circle use case where there's going to be something that happens in our platform. We're going to reach out to AWS. We're going to do some processing over there to find out what the right next step is. And it's going to reach back into our platform to say, hey, SailPoint, we need you to do something here. It's the next step in our workflow. The third event, the use case we're going to drive with you today is around audit. As we're doing all of this governance and security, we're generating a list of things that have happened that are interesting. Let's do something fun with those. Let's take those, let's save them off to an external system. And here we're going to use AWS S3 buckets as a place to take these events. Which events? Hey, that's up to you. SailPoint has this built into their platform, but this is about building something that matches our customers' needs. They're going to take those events, put them alongside all their other events. And AWS S3 buckets are a fantastic place to put those files so that they can be archived, you can save them, and have them when you need them. So those are our three use cases. And I'm going to turn the screen over here to my colleague, Neil McLennan, who's going to start driving through the use cases. And as he's getting set up, I'm going to talk about the first one, which is the application monitoring with AWS CloudWatch.
Thanks, David. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
All right. Sounds good, Neil. While you're sharing it, let me talk a little bit about this. So, CloudWatch, application monitoring system, SailPoint SaaS platform, an application. This is a match made in heaven. We're going to take the stuff that AWS does really well, marry it up with the stuff that we do really well, and you're going to see events coming from SailPoint being fed into CloudWatch to say, hey, let's track this, let's monitor it, let's make sure the application's doing what they're doing. Neil, take it away.
Yep. So where we're going to start today with our first use case is around that application monitoring. We are a SaaS tenant, and so we are an application that you may want to use alongside other applications. And if you're using things like AWS's CloudWatch to monitor logs from various other applications that you have, whether they're running on AWS or even other services like us, we can actually take various things that we're doing that are interesting and bring them over to AWS's CloudWatch. And so what you're seeing here on the screen is our tenant. That's where we're gonna start the conversation today. And so in this tenant, I'm logged in as an administrator. This administrator has all the abilities to configure the system. And so at the top, you can kind of see various things that I can do. And I'm going to go over to this admin tab. And so in this admin tab, this is kind of our administrative console. And the administrative console allows you to configure the system. And part of what we're talking about here is being able to take various things that we're doing from an administrative side and bring it over to AWS. And so we can see here we have dashboards that monitor the health of the various things that SailPoint does on a day-to-day basis. As we're looking at your identities and the accounts and accesses that they have, and provisioning out access and making sure that all the systems are running efficiently, we can see that here. Now, this is one place to check, and you can administer this directly on the screen just fine. But if you're used to setting up alerts and looking at things in AWS CloudWatch, we can extend that into that platform. And the way we extend that is by leveraging these event triggers here. And so what event triggers are is really something that's like a webhook. Now, we can subscribe to any number of events that are sprinkled across our SaaS platform. And this is an ever-growing list, and Colin will talk a little bit more about where to find this list and some information and more details about where to get information about these particular event triggers. But really, in this interface, really you can come through here and see the different types of triggers that are functionally apt for sending over to someplace like AWS, specifically AWS Event Bridge in this case. Now, part of identity security with SailPoint is bringing in a model of what an identity looks like. And so part of that is bringing in data from your HR sources and bringing in account information, and along with that, account and access information. And so we build this whole model of what a person is. We call that an identity. And we can see all the things that person actually has. And so this data collection process is something that we call an aggregation. And so we want to make sure that our view of that world, that aggregation of those accounts, is accurate at all times. And so one of the things that administrators commonly do in our SailPoint platform is make sure that aggregations are running smoothly. And when they are running smoothly, like most of the time, then everything's great. But if things fail, because passwords change or systems go down or there's network issues or whatever those issues tend to be, we want to make sure that somebody can do something about it and gain visibility into that. And this is really where we have this event trigger here for on accounts collected for aggregation. And so what this is all about is being able to send an event whenever an aggregation completes, whether that was successful or whether that was a failure. And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to subscribe to this event trigger. And we're going to give it a name. And in this, we want to send this over to EventBridge. So we're going to give it a name called aggregation failures to EventBridge, right? We're going to give it a description. We choose just any sort of description that's really just documentation for yourself. And we would choose some sort of subscription type. And subscription type really just describes the way that we send events out. By default, we can send via HTTP. That's just an HTTP post of information out, like any sort of webhook. And so you could wire this up with AWS and have it go through your AWS API gateway, if that's what you wanted to do. But we want to make it even simpler than that. Because you guys love AWS and all of its services that it has, we actually added an option here for Amazon EventBridge. And this makes a lot of the guesswork out of integration, there's no guesswork. It makes it straightforward, right? So we configure some things here around which AWS region we're talking to and what account in AWS that we're talking to. We also have the option to filter here. And note this filter, because we're going to come back to that filter here in a little bit. You can make sure it's enabled, disabled, and then we're going to hit save. So it's enabled. Okay, so that has been saved, and we can see that subscription reflected in the admin UI under the subscriptions tab. And looks like I have two of them. We don't need two, we just need one. So we have aggregation failures to EventBridge. That was just saved here, and we can see that it's enabled. If we want, we can actually go through here and edit it. We can also delete it, like you just saw me do. You can see activities around it. What we're going to do is go ahead and test this. And what this does is it reaches out to AWS, knocks on the door, and says, "Hey, CloudWatch, I have a test message here for you." So that's the kind of setup on the Identity Now side, or on the SailPoint SaaS side. It's pretty straightforward. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to flip over here to the AWS side, and we're going to show you how to configure this in Amazon EventBridge. And so when you browse in your console to EventBridge, you come to this screen. And what we are is we're listed as a partner event source. And so if you click on partner event source, you can start the configuration here by looking at SailPoint. We're here, and you can say setup here. So you can start this from the AWS side, or you could actually, because we sent a test message over, we can see that it's already kind of primed and ready. And because we sent that test message over, it says it's in status pending. There's no event bus associated with this, but we have received a message from our SailPoint SaaS tenant. So what I want to do is I want to set this up. So I'm going to select this and say associate with event bus. What this is going to do is kind of activate this event bus so that it comes from the SailPoint SaaS tenant that sent this over, and it's going to be using our Amazon EventBridge partner configuration that we set up.
And Neil, it's just that easy. Like there's no IAM role or anything that you have to configure beforehand. It's just as simple as setting up that taking the account ID in the region.
Yeah, we didn't have to do any sort of IAM roles here. In fact, we later on in the presentation, we do talk a little bit more about where you would want to set up IAM roles and things like that around some other use cases. But this use case, what you're seeing here, you didn't have to do anything. So it's already set up and ready to go. You're seeing it from soup to nuts. So yeah, so now let's do something with that. Now, if you remember back to what Sarah said earlier, we have this event source. We should be able to see this in the event buses now. We see this here. It's not initiated yet. And so what we want to do is we can start discovery of this, but we can also make sure that we get a message come through. And we can actually do a test subscription here. And what we're going to also do is refresh that. And then we're also going to go to rules. Now we want to do something with this particular event bus, right? So we're going to select which event bus. By default, you end up on the default event bus. That's not the one we're dealing with here. We're working with this aggregation accounts collected because we want to see if the accounts, any of those account aggregations failed or not, right? So we're going to create a rule, and rules help direct the event bridge buses to the messages on those buses to various services, just as Sarah mentioned earlier in her overview. So we're going to go here and say create rule, and we're going to create one called log everything. Right? We can give it a description. It's optional. And we're going to define a pattern. You can schedule these so that invokes on a schedule. But in this case, what we want to do is get events that come from a predefined service. And that service is SailPoint. You can test this. We're not going to test this because we will know it'll work. We also have the customer event bus listed here. And then this is where the fun begins. This is where you select the target that you want to deal with. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to select a CloudWatch log group because we're going to send this to CloudWatch. And what we're going to do is we have a CloudWatch log group already defined, and it's under AWS Events, SailPoint Aggregate Events, and that's where we're going to send things. And you could optionally add additional targets in, but this isn't good enough to accomplish our use case. So we're going to go ahead and say create. We can see that this is enabled, and we should be able to see back in our event source that it's active, and our event bus should be good to go. So now when we go through and send another test message, we can test this and make sure that that test comes all the way through that bus we just set up, and it should end up in CloudWatch. And so in CloudWatch, I'll go to the log groups, and here's that log group that we had set up earlier. So SailPoint aggregation events, right? And in here, we can see a message was received. And in this message, you can see this is just a sample test message. This is what we use for testing. It put a message on here, and we can read it, which is a good sign. That means that we're now flowing from the SailPoint SaaS solution in a matter of clicks all the way over to EventBridge, and EventBridge directed this directly to where we want it in the correct log group in CloudWatch.
So Neil, while we're there, Can we do two things? I guess first, can I have you zoom into the event that came in, just so we can kind of get an idea of the schema and what it looks like? And then also, if we could go back to the target afterwards, just to kind of show people how that specific setup worked and how easy it was to say, pass this event into CloudWatch logs, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully you can see a little bit more details there. This is what that message looks like. Now, this is, again, that test message that we put on the queue. Now I think it's appropriate to actually show a live message, and actually mock up both a failure and a success and make sure that they end up here as well.
Perfect.
So this is the CloudWatch message for that test. This is on the SailPoint side, how we configured it. You can see that it's very straightforward on our side. If we say edit, you can see all of our configuration options here. And hopefully you can see that a little bit better. I zoomed in.
It looks good.
So now let's have some fun. Let's make some things successful and some things not so successful. And so in my system, my system is I have various sources that are in disarray. Some things are connected, some things are not connected, and that's by design. So if you see any red things connected, that's because I took down parts of the infrastructure that make the SailPoint platform work. And so one of the things I want to do is we're going to do something that we should expect to work. We should see employees here, and this one should work.
I'm very keen to see you make this fail, Neil, because in our dry run, you had real trouble making this thing go south. So,
well, this is the one that should work, right? So, so this is just a file here, and we're going to give it our demo aggregation file. And this takes, it has about 157 user accounts on this, and so we bring it in. And so in SailPoint, we have a variety of different technologies that we can interface with and protocols to work with. And so this is a particular one that reads files, moves very quickly. And so, you know, that aggregated and brought in 157 accounts and the accesses associated with them just fine. Now, let's go to one that maybe won't be so successful. So I have a database here, and this one should not work because, well, I changed the password and I turned off the database. So it should be down for all intents and purposes. And so under the import data, we're going to go ahead and hit start here. And this one may take longer because we actually have redundancy built into our platform that will, when something goes down or we try something, we'll do a couple of retries. Because sometimes if you have, you know, very transient things like network failures or things like that, you know, we want to move past this. We want to make the platform resilient. And so what it does is it takes a little while just because of the retries here. And while that's running, we could actually go back to CloudWatch and see if the success message made it back to that CloudWatch group.
So while we're checking there, I'll also say, I see the numbers ticking up just a bit. So if you're just joining, we're here with SailPoint, and we're talking all about event-driven security and identity today. We have some great expert guests here from SailPoint that are walking us through their product and their platform. And then our friend Sarah here is an expert at EventBridge and event-driven architecture. So that's kind of what we're discussing, and we're diving into some demos.
Yeah. And so you can see here, and this may be hard for some people to see. I'll try to zoom in a little bit more. Maybe 125% is the sweet spot. But we can see here, this was that employee source. And we can see here that the status says success on this. And those are those 157 accounts that we just scanned. So we see this coming through, and that's great. Now this one hopefully is the failure. Here it is, source Prism. We see the status as error. And we see that the error is it couldn't get a connection to this host name. And so you can see a nice error message indicating what the failure is. So, you know, somebody could look into, why are we not talking to that database? Well, because the database is down. So this provides a lot of really good context into, you know, what the errors are. Now, keep in mind, back to our use case though, we only want to focus on the failures. We don't want to focus on the successes, because when the system's running just fine, you don't want to be spamming the log group. Now, you could filter some of this stuff out on the AWS side, or set up alarms for just the failures. That's all things that you can do in AWS. And you can also filter these things out on the EventBridge side if you want. Now, one of the things is maybe for sake of just efficiency, maybe let's not even initiate any messages to EventBridge if they're not failures. So what we're going to do is go. Yeah, go ahead.
While you're switching over there, it's important to talk about the fact that you got options here depending on what you want. The key is what Neil's going to show you is, hey, SailPoint can filter these out ourselves, and they never get sent over to EventBridge. But as Sarah was pointing out earlier, AWS has all kinds of facilities here. You can filter out at the eventing level to say at the bridge level to say, okay, you know what? It got to the event bridge. We know this isn't one for these guys. Don't send it over there. And CloudWatch can do some clever things with it too. And it really gives you a lot of flexibility here to make sure that the right notices are getting to the right places. And having that degree of flexibility means you're going to be able to match this to work for your use case.
That's right. It's all about choice when you're in implementation, right? You need to be able to do what you need to do. So what we're going to do is just.
Yeah. I was gonna say, Neil. Yeah, I was gonna say just like the ability to like filter the events that come through and the logical isolation that you get when you're setting up a bunch of different buses and different rules, right? Being able to say this bus here is for this set of rules and this is what it's going to do versus this one makes it a lot clearer when you're handling this at scale and when you're trying to manage all of these rules and buses and whatnot. A lot easier. So I'll let you get back to the filtering demo because I'm kind of intrigued.
Yeah, great. And so the filtering here, the way we do filtering on our side is these are all JSON messages, and as Sarah mentioned, the Event Bridge also uses JSON messages, right? So we're speaking kind of the same message payloads and everything kind of is very seamless between the AWS or SailPoint and AWS platforms, right? Now, because our events are JSON. Way we filter things out, the way we do it at SailPoint, is we use a JSON path syntax. And what we're really doing is, if you mention, as we saw in the CloudWatch message, we saw that status was success, and one was status is error. And what we want to do is we want to filter this out so that only messages that match this criteria fly and get sent out. And so the way we do that, as we say, is if the root node and there's an attribute called status, if that is not success, then we'll let it get sent. And so the nice thing is anything that's a payload of information in that you could send. And this has a lot of power too, because we had error messages in there. So if you said, hey, look, if this is an error message relating to database connection pooling, let's go send them to this other CloudWatch log group over here for databases. But if maybe it's related to SaaS infrastructure or my Lambda queue or something like that, we could send it to another place for somebody to watch. And that way you can direct it to the right team at the right time. So I'm going to repeat the same thing we just did, and so we're going to run a success and a failure, and the same exact sources and everything, and hopefully we'll only see the failure. Yep. I didn't realize if I'm on center or off. All right. So employees was the first one we did. Let's go and import data here.
By the way, folks, this import that Neil's triggering here, he's forcing the connection here to do what it does. You schedule these; these will come when you need them to come out. You can run them when you need them to get the information in for each of these connections.
Yeah, that's right. We have APIs that can drive these imports. We have schedules like you can see here in our UI that run these. We can run them manually. We have a lot of options here, and so we're going to go ahead and run this one manually again. And there we go. And so let's run it. And so what we can do is go back to CloudWatch, and we'll go back to that log group here. We can sit and spin. Now we haven't seen anything else come in. These are the three that we had from the earlier run. So that other aggregation should have finished by now. And so we don't see that in here, so that means it's getting filtered. So we know at least the filtering's working. Now this other one should appear in here. Again, it's that resiliency and those retries here that, okay, it failed out. And there we are. We have the failure that appeared here. And so now we can see that it
fail. Good job.
Success in making it fail. That's right. So we can see here that only the ones for status with error are here and CloudWatch. And so, this is really the kind of the first, use case. There's other various events that you could subscribe to here. If identity is getting a weird state or provisioning fails. So if any provisioning event fails or has an error or, the system's down, or we also have these components called virtual appliances. And if those things go down, any of that stuff we have events for. And that allows us to extend it with, a few minutes of configuration here straight into AWS. And if you're an organization that uses AWS's wonderful infrastructure, this is seamless for you.
Very cool. So I know this isn't the only use case with SailPoint and EventBridge, right? So this is a really cool way to pipe SailPoint events into CloudWatch, but I'm sure we have a few others.
Well, we sure do. So the second event that we're gonna be working on with you guys here on is showing how the two systems can work together. So we're gonna have, in this case, SailPoint's gonna do its normal business. Somebody is going to be changing roles or changing departments in your organization. As part of keeping track of their security, of course, this means they need new things. Like when I became a strategy evangelist, I left the sales engineering team. I had to get rid of some of my old access. I don't update Salesforce nearly as much as I used to, but I needed new access to do my new job. Well, that's something that SailPoint does automatically as part of its lifecycle management. It detects the change, recognizes the old roles are going away and new roles are being added, and translates that and provisions it so that I get the new access that I need automatically. Now, that's what we do out of the box once you've got us all configured. What about if you wanted to do something custom? And that's exactly the use case Neil's going to show you next. In this case, we're going to take that event, that, hey, something about this person's identity has changed event, and we're going to feed that in to EventBridge. And then it's going to take that and push it to Lambda, where AWS Lambda is going to run through a script to decide, hey, what's the next step we need to do? Do I need to do anything else? Oh, I do. What I want to do is I want to have a manager go and make decisions about Dave's old access. Does he need that access? He may still need to maintain it for a couple of more months. Let's figure that out before we take it away. So you get this full loop. Starts out in the SailPoint SaaS platform, moves over to AWS. AWS does some magic, figures it out, and then feeds back to SailPoint to say, hey, SailPoint, I need you to take this step. And that's what Neil's going to show us how to do here.
Yeah, exactly. And so, with SailPoint, identity is, we're all about identity security, and identity is the kind of core data models we talked about with the aggregation scenario, things like that. Now, identities have a life cycle. When people join an organization, they need things set up. We provision access to them, as David just mentioned. And when people leave, we may want to terminate their access and shut it down. And we can do that in an automated fashion. We can configure the SailPoint solution to automatically set up access and automatically, take away access and disable accounts as part of good security posture. And sometimes, as you move through different, life cycles, say I had one job and I got a better job, that may not be as much of an automated decision as you want. You may want manual eyes or regular people's eyes to validate whether or not that's appropriate access or not. And so in SailPoint, we actually have this feature functionality called certifications. Certifications are an access review. And they can be set up, to be run periodically or event-driven or even API-driven. And so in here, we have ability to trigger these. And so we're going to show you is a way that we can detect the change in a person's department, that indicates, hey, this person's moving from this department to this department. Have that go over to AWS, and AWS then runs Lambda. And that Lambda is actually going to call back to our API and initiate a certification. And so that's the use case here. Now, we're just doing that as a showcase of two things. It can showcase the fact that, we have these APIs and integration points that AWS can leverage to things like Lambdas. But this is also showing the fact that you can do some other interesting things with EventBridge. And EventBridge can go in and even take that to a step function or any other type of workflow type of operation that could coordinate further actions in the business. So if somebody were to change departments or get terminated, then you can not only take away their access within us or initiate processes like certification access reviews, but also orchestrate other things within AWS or even other systems. So this allows AWS to kind of be an orchestration engine if you want to use it like that. And we actually do have SailPoint customers that are using AWS in exactly that fashion in production today. So it's very exciting. And so what we're going to do here is start off with another trigger. So we're going to use the identity attribute trigger here. And so we're going to subscribe to this one. And this one is all going to be about department changes. And so again, when we build these models of identities up, we have information about who you are and what your job is, who your manager is. We also capture organizational information like departments, and we can trigger off of this and do certain actions within SailPoint. We can also extend these out to events and alert other places in the business that, hey, this thing has changed. Let's do something about it. And so what we're going to do is bring this out into a subscription to EventBridge. Again, we're going to configure it in very much the same way that we did last time. So very much the same AWS account and region and all that good stuff. I'm going to hit save.
I just want to point out you're getting a lot of love in the chat from Theory of Rebecca, from Akram, from Alex Masha. So I think everyone's really enjoying the demo so far.
Great. Apparently I'm very click happy because I end up creating multiple integrations here. So sorry about that. And so we have our event trigger set up. This is very similar to what we did with the aggregation failures. Again, very simple setup. There we go. So we're ready to go from the SailPoint side. Now all we have to do is go back and we need to send a test message here. What this will do is, again, knock on that door that is EventBridge, and we should see this in the partner event source. So back on Amazon EventBridge in our console, we can see events. We see that we have our previous one from the previous demo that's active. We have this other one that's pending because we sent that test message. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and associate this with the event bus. Get that going. So that's active. Now we want to do something more with this. So we're also going to create some rules. And so
by the way,
this is where
you guys made that super easy for us. This association where we fire off the event and then you guys associate it with the backend. I've worked with a few different systems and I was very, very impressed here. This is really cool stuff. Real easy.
It's a good way also for the customer, the end customer, to kind of control the flow of events, right? Because sometimes maybe you want to pause the bus, so you want to stop receiving events and you don't want events to trigger anything. So being able as the customer to associate and disassociate the event source from the event bus at will is, I think, a pretty good feature there as well.
Yeah, I think it is too. So now, just so you're aware of some prior setup that we did. I didn't want everybody to watch me code all day, so we did already set up a Lambda here. And so one of the things that we talked about is that we're going to generate an event that's going to go to a Lambda, and the Lambda is going to call SailPoint. And so what we did is we created a Lambda here called Generate Access Review. And so,
show me the Lambda. Show me the Lambda.
and this is something that we can provide the details around here. But essentially, what this is going to do, and I'll get to the meat of it, is it actually makes calls to our identity, our SailPoint platform, and using our wonderful API framework. And so Colin's going to talk a little bit more about the API framework and the event triggers and where you can find all this information a little bit later on. And this is something that will also be published to our developer portal in due time. And so all this does is basically create all it does is create a certification campaign. And so that's what we're gonna leverage. We're gonna leverage this Lambda. This is just using Node.js, but you could use your favorite coding of choice, and all that works just fine. So we're going to actually go back to EventBridge. I just want to make you aware of that Lambda that we have there. And what we're going to do is create a rule. And so we're going to select the event bus. It's not the account aggregation one. It's going to be the identity attribute one. And so in this one, you can see that, hey, there's no rules for this yet. And so I'm going to create a rule. And so what we're primarily trying to do here is generate an access review. So I'm going to call it generate access review. You define your pattern. We want this to go to our service partner, SailPoint. Again, so really easy to configure all this.
Neil, before you move on, can we go back up to that event pattern real quick, just to talk about that really quickly? So this pattern right here is pretty broad. You can use the different fields in that payload that SailPoint sends over. You can use those, kind of what we were talking about earlier with filtering. You can use those fields inside of the event itself to kind of make sure that the rule that you're defining is actually a bit more specific and really fine-grained control to the end target that you have. So I just wanted to point that out. And
yeah, that's right. This is essentially where you do the filtering on the AWS side, right?
Right.
So yeah, we just find that we're trying to keep things a little simple here. And so we have the event bus, and now we want to do the fun stuff, which is select targets. And I don't even have to select Lambda function because it's already done for me, which is really nice. And so what we're going to do is say generate access review. That's what we're going to select. There's some additional areas where you could say I only want to use part of the certain events or even part of the events. So if you want to dive in deeper from the event bus, you can. We actually don't need to do that here at all for our demo. We're actually going to use the whole message there. And just for good logging practices, I'm also going to go ahead and send this to CloudWatch so we can actually see that the event made it there. And what we're going to do is this is a separate CloudWatch logging group. This is called SailPoint Identity Events. And so this just shows you that you don't have to send it to just one place. You can actually send it to multiple places. So in this case, we're going to generate an access review within SailPoint via our APIs, and we're going to also log it in a CloudWatch log group so somebody could go back and debug it. So they can see, what was that message again? Okay, well, the message is stored there in that log group that can be automatically purged. You can also go back and look at the execution of the Lambda itself, which is also in CloudWatch.
So yeah, it's actually a really cool feature there, which allows you to add multiple targets like that. So I've got one event, it got put into one event bridge. All of a sudden, it's forking off into 3, 4, 5 places, going to the different places you need it to go. That doesn't meet every use case, but this is a great example of where we want to record it. Again, application monitoring is cool. Thank you, CloudWatch. But we also want to do something cool with it. Hey, send it over to Lambda. We do both. It splits it, gives them both a copy of the payload. They both go off and do their thing. It made some of our use cases really, really slick.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's all the configuration that you need to do on the Amazon side. So we're actually ready to kind of demonstrate this. Now, coming back to our event triggers here, we know we could go through and try to do a test subscription here. That would flow over to EventBridge just fine. But keep in mind that the data that we're using for this, the test subscription is just a test message. If we try to generate a certification for those test users, they actually don't really exist in the system. And so we couldn't actually generate a certification. So the best way to test this is actually to do a live end-to-end test. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to actually show you a couple more features within SailPoint. And so we're going to go over to certifications first. So you can see the certifications that I am currently assigned to. And so these are the access reviews that are currently assigned to me. Should be none. So look, hey, nothing to see here. That's good. And so what we're expecting is when I fire off this event, then we should see a certification generate here. And again, we want to actually fire off a certification campaign in response to a change in department. And now let's talk about how people change departments. And so whenever identities get their changes, they can come from various places. Those can come from an HR source commonly. And so we can receive feeds and updates through those aggregation processes and change that data dynamically. For some people, especially for people that aren't employees in our system, we leverage something called non-employee lifecycle management in order to edit the attributes. And because this introduces change right away and a nice UI, we're actually going to show this straight away. And so I went back to my dashboard within SailPoint. We can see manage non-employees. And in here, you can see the different types of employees that I would, or non-employees that I could manage. So in this case, I have some contractors, I have some service accounts. I'm really interested in contractors. So if I go to the contractors here, we should see a couple of the contractors that I have in my system. Now, my system is just a demo system, kind of my own personal playground. And so I have a couple of people here that are part of a contracting agency, the Wild Stallions. And you can see here the people. Now let's change one of the people here. Let's change Rufus. So if we select Rufus, because I'm an administrator in the system, I can actually edit all of these data elements. So I can see that his username, his first name, last name, and all this kind of stuff. We can see here that his department is currently music. But let's just say that maybe something changes and he goes to the history department. And so we're going to go ahead and change this so that it's a history change, or he's in the history department. And so what this should do is initiate that change. Now, I have my system configured so there's no approvals for any of this. And because I'm an administrator, it just goes and carries that change out in Rufus straight away. Now, because we've subscribed to that change, it should have flown through our event triggers over to EventBridge. Now we can see this here in our admin UI, and we can also see this over in the Amazon EventBridge side. And so let's go back over to the Amazon console real quick, and let's see if we can see anything in that CloudWatch view. So we're going to go into the log groups here. And because it's an identity event, we would expect to see an identity event. And sure enough, there's an identity event. And we can look at this and we can see this is an event that describes an identity change in SailPoint. And hopefully you guys can see that pretty well on the screen.
Can you zoom in a little bit there, Neil? It's a little.
Yeah, let me try to do that. How about that?
Just to be clear, this is the event that's being passed into, Lambda directly, right? And Lambda is actually using some of these fields to then call the SailPoint API.
That's exactly right. And so it's going to look to see if the change is on department, and it's going to kick off that certification. So we see that department went from music to history. In fact, we don't really care about the values here, but if you wanted to care about the values, you certainly could. It's up to your implementation. So we see that one went just fine. So that's great. So we receive the event. Now, because this is going through Lambda, we can actually go and look at the Lambda log group as well. So there's that AWS Lambda generate access review event, and we can see its execution as well. And you can see here that it's calling various and I have it set up so it's logging information about the API calls that it's doing. So it's getting an access token, and this is great for if you're debugging things within AWS. You can see the output straight away. And so it looks like everything was successful here. So if we actually went back, as if I was if I was a developer, I can come back and see certifications. Did we actually receive a certification assigned to me? And so I'm going to go.
While you're doing that, maybe interesting to talk for me about the certification for just a minute. There's a couple of different kinds of certifications at SailPoint, but the core value is having people who are knowledgeable about security decisions that need to be made, run through their checklist and say, yes, these things are correct, and no, these things aren't. That's the bottom line. We can certify membership in roles. We can certify their contents. Hey, these roles match to the right entitlements. We can certify, we can have a manager certify their employees. Hey, go take a look at this. You can have an application owner go out and say, hey, I need to certify all the people who have access to this OneDrive account, or to this team, or to this record in Salesforce. All of those are different kinds of certifications. And Neil's doing a specific manager-focused certification.
So if I could ask a question here.
Yeah.
These certifications, so I see there's a little due in 29 days. So I assume every so often, and based on the certification itself, it'll prompt you to recertify, the users, everything like that.
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that's all configurable based on our settings, right? And so
Gotcha.
What I did is I put the end of the month whenever I call the API. And so whenever we generate this, it'll say, okay, well, this will be good till the end of the month. And so you can make things be as dynamic or as specific as you want in any of your API calls, or even in the configurations within, our platform.
But
Which
ad
is
hoc
really nice.
certifications are a real, they're a powerful tool in the toolkit. You don't want to wait 6 months and then have to review 200 things. You want to sometimes bite it off into chunks. And this technique that Neil's showing also would allow you to dynamically create the entitlement to user and break it up. Hey, we've got a new application, or the application owner has changed, or hey, whatever the changes are that you're detecting, they can trigger, oh, you know what, I need to certify these 10 things right away. Or hey, they've got that 200 line certification coming up at the end of next month. Let's break that up and let's take on 30 of them now, right? You've got a lot of flexibility here, especially when you start adding programmatic smarts to the generation of these certification campaigns.
Yeah, that's right. And we see all the access both assigned and detected. So as part of that aggregation process where we're bringing information in to SailPoint, we can see what is truly assigned and how they assigned it, and versus what is just something that we've detected them have. So this helps us see what is in or out of band. In this particular use case itself is around event-based certifications, right? And that's one of the things we wanted to show that AWS kicking this off is you have a lot of control over how you want that certification to exist, right? Who it goes to and what the text says and what contents are in there and who you're certifying. All that stuff is really at your fingertips, and so. Now, the other interesting thing is whenever we show this to an end user, I'm a certifier here and I've assigned this to myself, and you can make that assigned to, relationships such as manager or department owner or things like that if you care to as well. I assign this to myself and I actually can review this access. And now we try to make this very easy for an end user to understand, so that part of the value that we have here is you can dive into what these types of access have, and if this was a more complicated set of access with things like nested groups or groups that contain groups, you can find out information about this. You can add comments as well, and those are preserved as part of your auditing history, which makes it a very powerful. In addition, what makes SailPoint also unique is a lot of the other features that we've been investing in around predictive identity. And so one of the things is if you've set your system up with predictive identity, it can learn what is a standard access or not. And so if Rufus here could be compared with his peers and could help guide the decision here in an intelligent AI-driven fashion, talking about true AI here. And so it says, you could say something like, hey, you know what? Rufus shouldn't have access to this because none of his peers do. He's doing the same job, right? And that could help guide, this set of decision criteria. Now, let's just say that, you know what? Rufus he just got a title bump, or maybe it was a reorg. Let's go ahead and say approve here. Now, these approvals are all kept and stored as part of your certification record. And so auditors, when they ask periodically for, have you been reviewing and can guarantee that everybody has access to just the things they should, you can actually pull these and search them, and so that you can actually show them to your auditors and say, yeah, we have control over our access. This is what identity governance and security is all about. So we make it very easy. We just completed that certification. Again, one decision, but the UI scales, for all these. You can see that now I moved to the completed tab. You can see I've completed certs, and it was that easy. And so that really, brings us to the end of that second use case there, and shows you how you can leverage, some of the dynamic capabilities of Lambda, some of the cool features in SailPoint, such as the non-employee lifecycle manager, our certification access reviews, and even our APIs, right? We're kind of stitching all the things together to make sure that it works for you.
Perfect. So why don't we take this time, since we're about an hour in. Sarah, do you want to reintroduce the show and tell everybody what we've seen so far?
Yeah, so this is Howdy Partner. We're showing off SailPoint, one of our partners who's integrated with EventBridge, and they focused on identity and access management use cases. So let's go right back.
There we go. Yeah, so far we've seen some pretty cool use cases with EventBridge and identity change, what happens if someone changes an identity. We've also seen that part in particular was EventBridge into Lambda ultimately, right? So from SailPoint into Lambda. We've also done some application monitoring stuff. So from SailPoint into EventBridge into CloudWatch logs. And we're about to see one more. So I'm excited to see what they show us.
Ania, you ready to start number 3? You got one more, or you want to show us a little? All right.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick us off here. So, as we're doing a lot of the various features that we have here at SailPoint, we have, things like the access reviews, which we just showed you. We're pulling in account and access related data. We're setting up accounts. We're decommissioning accounts based off of security events. We're reconciling the actual state of the world versus the desired state of the world. And we're proving all this stuff out in auditing. We have things like a separation of duties, which helps you, maintain compliance. And so one of the things that we want to do with the SaaS platform is really make sure that we put all of this data at your fingertips. And so kind of core to that is this search functionality. And so this is something that we when we designed our SaaS platform, we wanted to make sure that we fully index all of our identities, all of our accesses, and also the events, the audit events, and the account activities that are going on in the system. So in here, you can see any given person and all the things they have access to. By simply clicking on them, you'll get a pop-up of details like this is Aaron Nichols. There's some accounts that they have. Here's all the accesses that they have that aren't assigned. Here's access profiles and even applications that we've discovered. And so we have a lot of information here at our fingertips. You can query all this stuff. And so this uses kind of a Lucene type of syntax. And we have made investments in here around saving searches, performing recent searches, as well as making it really easy to use. And so you can see here, I'm just kind of typing some things in. And maybe I'm interested in things that were created in the past day. And so one of the things you can say is created. Show me anything that is created between now and now minus 1D, which is shorthand for now minus 1 day, right? Yesterday. So anything that was created between yesterday and today, here's what we want. Now, our use case here is really about auditing, right? And we talked about a lot of times, you need to integrate with other systems. You need to prove things to auditors. And so a lot of times, AWS serves as some of that functionality. You may have infrastructure already set up in AWS that accumulates data. And so some of those things are things like AWS S3 or S3 Glacial, or you may even have a DynamoDB that accumulates data there. And so if that's where you want to accumulate data, then we can integrate with it and send these types of things over to AWS. And that's really what our third use case is about, is really taking a lot of the important audit information that we accumulate and making it participate in a broader ecosystem, right? And other systems, as well as AWS, but other systems like SCIM solutions, such as security event and incident monitoring solutions, could consume that from an S3 bucket or things like that. And AWS can facilitate that broad cloud-to-cloud communication. And so what I'm going to show you
point there is the fact that what we have is we're just fitting into your ecosystem. You've got a security policy. You queue your events up in S3. You put them aside. That's where your storage is. Fantastic. We're absolutely going to follow along, make sure that we're doing the same thing all your other applications are doing. You build all your metricing, you build all your alerting, you build all your thresholding. Awesome. We're going to play in the same pool and make sure that our application, when it delivers its security events, we're delivering them to the same place you want them. And that's the key.
That's right. And so what we're going to do is show you how to get security events out of SailPoint and put them in S3. And that's what this key of this next use case is. So now if you notice that in search here, I have events and I have account activities. Account activities are things like provisioning events. They offer a rich set of details around what succeeded and what failed. And you can see that Prism one's still down, right? We just saw that earlier. And so this provides, a rich UI around all these things, but we want just the events. We want audit events. We don't want account activities. So we can actually filter these out and just say, I only really care about events. And we can see that other tab goes away. And so now the nice thing is we can also save this search. And so we can use this later, right? So we can say, I want this to be daily audit events, daily audit for S3. So we're going to hit save on that. And what happens is this save search, you can kind of see it here, it has been annotated and saved so you can have these and refer back to them later. So we have some customers that love their searches and they actually operationalize around the various things that you can search on here. Well, not only can you operationalize on them, you can get reports on them. You can also event those things out as well. And so one of the things that you can do is in a save search query, you can subscribe to an event. And if you subscribe to a search query, then you can get that as an email. You can also get that as an event trigger, and that event trigger can go where? Event Bridge. And so what we're going to do is,
I was going to say that's going to event.
Got to be quicker on the mute button. This is Howdy partner here. Quick draw. So we're going to go over here to our event triggers. And we're going to do that same setup that we did last time. Again, it's pretty straightforward. Hopefully, if you do things enough, you remember them, right? So we're going to go here, and this is the trigger we're going to use this time called scheduled search. And so we're going to do a subscribe to this. And we're going to go ahead and call this one audit events to Event Bridge, right? And we'll give it a name.
While we're there, Neil, so so Alex Masha brought this up earlier, the different types of events that you have, fire and forget, response required. Could you maybe speak a bit about those?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a good eye that some of you guys had. So the fire and forget is basically us broadcasting messages out. We don't expect anything in response. And so a fire and forget event is we're just going to, something happened, we can alert people, right? And so we can broadcast that out to, things, via webhooks or, things via EventBridge. It's really your choice, right? And so that's essentially what fire and forget is. Now, request response is a bit more like a direct response to some particular action. And so we use this for things like workflow callouts and things like that. So if you need to determine something, then it provides an ability to feed back to the system. We're requiring you to respond to this event rather than just broadcasting out blindly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Yeah. Those responses actually give us quite a bit of flexibility because it's a stopping point within our own internal engine to say, hey, I'm waiting for you to tell me whether I'm supposed to continue or not. And we can then go out and make decisions, which then further impact the downstream flow of the SailPoint infrastructure. It's a lot of the events right now are just, hey, we want to tell you about some stuff. But as Neil was saying, sometimes we want to ask a question and then we'll wait for a response from AWS to say, oh yeah, go on to the next step, or you know what, no, we're done here. A good example of this, of a response, is when we're doing an access request. You can get in flow and say, actually, Tom's requested access to this application, but you know what? He's not trained on that application. We did a call out, we went and checked. Again, we called AWS. AWS went to the application store and said, oh, is he trained on this? You know what? No, he's not, and fed that right back. Hey, he can't get that access. Not allowed. Doesn't have the right training for it.
One other important call out there is that anything that is requires a response, we have different ways that we can respond to these things too. So we can respond in a synchronous fashion, which means that essentially, hey, I have my response at the ready. Maybe it's very deterministic. maybe it's a Lambda function that can respond in, under 10 seconds. Then if it's very deterministic, then just return, right? And that can be used for things like determining approvers and things like that, or, maybe you have a database of externally that has all these approvers. You can integrate with things like that. But sometimes your response may not be immediate, especially if you involve humans. Try as I might, I can't respond within 10 seconds, right? And so that's where we can also offer asynchronous responses. So, hey, here's the message. Just get back to me within this deadline. That we see here in these events, when I have a response deadline, this is basically telling the system how long I can wait for a response for, right? And so that's an asynchronous capability of, hey, look, if I didn't hear back from EventBridge within this amount of time, then let's just call it done, right? So that provides that communication back. Now, the other interesting thing, we have a third option, is if you're not synchronous, you're not asynchronous, what are you? Well, you're dynamic. Maybe you want to make it is executing really fast, then let's go ahead and send it back right away. But if your execution of Lambda is taking longer within Lambda, then you can actually say, look, it's already been 10 seconds. Let's just reply back asynchronously. So it allows you to make those calls within your AWS platform however you want.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, so we have our subscription set up. We did the same thing. So I'm going to go back to our EventBridge. And we're going to go to partner event sources. Again, we see our save search complete is now pending. We're going to go ahead and say associate. Again, pretty painless. And then, so what we're going to do now is talk a little bit about the setup that we have here. So now the ultimate goal is we want to build a rule that's going to be associated with the save search complete partner event source. And that's going to go to S3, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're going to route this through Lambda into S3, and we're going to leverage the wonderful AWS SDK in order to store that message in S3. And so what we've done is, and this is kind of back to some of the previous conversations we had about IAM roles and things like that, this is where you may get a little more intricate with your roles, right? When we're talking about S3, there's a lot of different permissions you want to give to S3 and cross services between S3 and Lambda to make sure they execute right. And so we're actually going to store things in this S3 bucket right here. It's called SailPoint Audit Records. If we go in here, there's no objects in it. So our goal is to get an object from our search into this area here. And so hopefully, when we configure this, you'll see that there. Now, S3 is the ultimate place that we want to store audit records. Maybe that's where based on permissions, maybe that's write only, and then it's preserved there, and then auditors can query it with a different set of access rights in order to preserve that, right? Now, S3 is part of the equation. That's the ultimate goal. And we know the entry point is EventBridge, right? Now, the other piece of this is we're going to have Lambda here. And so what we do is we have a Lambda function called audit events to S3, pretty aptly named. And so we have this one, and this one actually, I got to give AWS credit. You guys have some fantastic documentation out there. As somebody who has not written a lot of Lambdas, I was able to pick this up and run with it, and I did this in probably about 20 minutes time. So it was really easy. You guys had a pretty spot on example. I was able to follow it and go. So yeah, so what this does is it pretty much follows the example that you guys have in your AWS documentation. It's leveraging the AWS SDK. We're getting a reference to S3. Our S3 bucket is called SailPoint Audit Records. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the event that we have. We're going to get some details from that event, and we're going to send it to the S3 bucket. And the key of that bucket is going to be the time that we receive that key. So essentially, we'll start to see different keys in that bucket that correspond with the time that they arrive. Okay. And so this is the glue that's going to hold it all together. And so this already has access rights assigned via IAM roles that give it permissions on put object on S3. And so only this Lambda function can put objects on that S3. So that's the configuration there. And so now let's actually go ahead and do the easy configuration on EventBridge side. Let's give it a rule. And we're going to select that save search complete bus. I'm going to say create rule. We're going to call this one audit events to S3 just because it's consistently. And so we're going to say event pattern. Again, you could filter out events. So again, if you wanted to filter on certain audit events or things like that in here, you could definitely do that. I'm just making sure that this is just coming from us.
There you
and
go.
then, yep, we're good to go. And then, so much like we did with the previous use case, we have a Lambda function here, and that Lambda function is going to be audit events to S3. And we're going to go ahead and do another CloudWatch log group as well. And I think that one's called SailPoint search events.
All right.
Nice thing
while
is,
you're here,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, while you're here, if you just joined, what Neil is doing right now is he's setting up a rule, and the rule is basically sending all of the events from SailPoint for the specific trigger that he set up earlier to EventBridge, and then from EventBridge, the two targets that were selected are the specific Lambda function, audit events to S3, and this CloudWatch log group called SailPoint search events. And you didn't have to set any roles or any IAM permissions to get the connection between SailPoint and between AWS set up. It was, just copying and pasting an account ID and choosing a region. It's as simple as that.
Yep, super simple. All right, so we have this going here. So that's enabled. We can take a look and make sure that these are all active. So save search complete is active. And we can go to CloudWatch, and let's go back to our SailPoint UI. And so let's go back to search, because that's ultimately what we're trying to get to here, right? We want to get those search events. And so we just go back to that search, and we have that save search already there. So we're going to go back to that save search. And the nice thing is about save search is you can come back to them at any time. And so we're going to go in here, and we can say view subscriptions. And it'll tell me I don't have a subscription. So if I want, I can create another subscription. So I do. And the nice thing is about when you subscribe to these, our system likes to ask you some pertinent questions around how and when and where you'd like to subscribe to this. And because you may have people that operate all around the globe, we want to confirm which time zone are you really talking about, because you may have security personnel that work, the central time zone. You may have also people that work in, the London time zone, right? And so people work around the globe in different fashions for every enterprise, and we want to make sure that we work according to your needs. So we'll say next, and this is the subscription that we want to subscribe. And so we call this daily audit events. So we probably want to see this daily. Now, daily could be interpreted many different ways. You could make this, I only want Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at certain times. And you can select all those here. Or if you did say, you know what, daily is truly daily, not week daily, I can just be like, every day at midnight. And so what will happen is this would gather up those search results, bundle those, and then either email those out if you choose the email, or send them out as an event on our configured EventBridge integration over to EventBridge, and EventBridge can archive them via Lambda to S3. And so now the other nice thing about this is we have subscription events here. We can also choose to send a report if there's no items to match, or turn that on or off. And so if you don't want to bug people if there's nothing to look at, maybe if you were looking at failures, right? Or hey, this access didn't get assigned when it was supposed to. Maybe that's something you want to bug somebody about. But if there's no results, then why bug somebody? Why get an email for something that says there's nothing to do? When the system is operating, you may not want to operate. So, but because we're auditing, we actually do want to send everything. And so I'm going to click next. This is the last step where it allows me to basically confirm everything. I could hit subscribe and this would run at midnight every night because that's how I configured it. I don't think anybody here on the Twitch stream wants to wait around till midnight. So we also offer some nice, easy test. So what this will actually do is gather results from this now and send a test both via email and via our EventBridge integration.
How thoughtful. So I don't have to set up a subscription for like a minute from now or 2 minutes from now. I can just send a test event just like that.
That's right. That's right. So this should have sent via our event engine. And if we go to our log group, just to make sure that everything's working the way it should, go to search events. There we go. We have an event here, and you can see the data that this has. You can see all these audit events in here. Here's that sign off for certification we just did, right? So we can see all these audit events that are received in CloudWatch here. Now, this also should have gone to Lambda. And so if we go look at Lambda, the audit events to S3, we can see its runtime here. And you can see that it put things in S3 bucket with the key. And so we should be seeing a key with this name. And again, that's that timestamp of when it received this information. So every midnight, you would see this timestamp probably sometime around midnight, except for when you're testing the connection like I am here.
Neil, I wanted to give a quick shout out. There's always that moment when you're developing something, when you've configured it and you wait and there's that pregnant pause where you're waiting to see if it actually worked. I have to say that when I was building these configurations with AWS, they were never the issue. Sometimes there's an issue between the keyboard and the chair. Yes, that's something that happened. But consistently, AWS just gave it to me. And
right.
It made it real easy. And you guys saw here, Neil just built 3 of them, each one of them. Each time he said, oh, it's going to be there. Boom, it was there. And like right now, I was quite impressed. It makes developing these and iterating through your test cycles, it made it really easy to get the right stuff out the other end. It was really cool.
That's right. I'm always impressed with how easy it is to stitch together all the various services in AWS, and everything just kind of works. And it's really nice to see what you can do. And really what we're demonstrating today is really the tip of the iceberg. Through our developer community, and which Colin will talk about here in a little bit. There's a lot more things that you can do, and a lot more actions. And we're actively investing in all the various things that you can do. And you can, between leveraging AWS and SailPoint together, it's unstoppable.
I agree. Hey, you mentioned the developer community, Neil. Maybe this is a good time for us to have our developer relationist, Colin, come in and talk to us.
Yeah, one sec. Let me finish what I'm doing here, just to show finish up the demo, and because I do want to show that this data actually did arrive here, and then we'll flip over to Colin.
Awesome.
And so you can see here's that audit record in that bucket that wasn't there before. We actually can open this up, and you can see all of those records here that were in this search page here. And so that's all been bundled up and sent across to AWS. So you can see all these things are essentially the same that are here. And so that kind of just shows you how you can get, take data from our system, move it to another system without having to do much. Obviously, I elaborated and explained a little bit along the way. Hopefully, you guys found that helpful.
Yeah, this is super cool, Neil. And Neil's underselling the power of that search bar a little bit. There's a lot of very cool stuff you can do there to get exactly the data you're looking for. And as you just saw, whatever data is right here, boom, put it in S3, fire it over to Lambda to do some processing, put it in CloudWatch, wherever you need to go.
Yeah, step functions too. There's a lot of real cool power in step functions. And so, and AWS is constantly adding services there too.
And you can trigger these by APIs too, by the way.
All right, well, I'll turn it back to David.
Hey, Colin's turn for sure. Colin, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about our developer community. Neil mentioned it on the call, and we'd love for you to come talk to folks about how they can participate, how they can do some of this cool stuff too.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I'm Colin McKibben. I'm the developer advocate at SailPoint. And we have a developer portal at developer.sailpoint.com. And this is a great resource for anyone looking just to get documentation about our APIs, our event triggers that that Neil's been showing us this whole time, as well as a community where you can discuss our APIs and tooling. So yeah, this is the developer community. We have our API references, several of them for our identity security platform. So it covers all of our endpoints, and our documentation, which provides a nice getting started guide. So making your first API call, what kind of credentials you're going to need to generate, and a nice sample curl request to make that call, as well as an extensive authentication guide. So we support several different kinds of authentication, including OAuth 2 and personal access tokens. So this is a great resource for setting up your authentication for whatever custom integration you are going to build. And then here's the event trigger documentation. So again, we have a nice getting started guide to get set up on your first event trigger, but also the actual references for a lot of the same event triggers that Neil was just talking about in this demonstration. Yeah, and then finally, we also have a community forum. So you don't have to sign up to view anything on the community. So if you're just looking to get answers to your questions, you can go ahead and just go right to /discuss. But if you want to post questions or post feature requests, just sign up and you can start posting in here. All right. Yeah, I'll hand that back over to you, David.
Awesome. I think Mo and Sarah, we have come to the end of our demonstration. I think y'all are ready to take the lead.
I think so. So just before we close out, like what parting words you have for the audience? Maybe in summary, what did we learn today?
Sure. So listen, I think it's pretty straightforward. SailPoint has a SaaS platform that focuses on identity security. AWS provides a lot of great facilities to do all kinds of interesting things with the data our solution generates. And it's really about putting the two together. We talked about 3 different kinds of use cases, but this is a platform that gives you a lot of flexibility. And we're really excited about having AWS working with us, delivering identity security to our customers. And that's really what this is facilitating. I wanted to give a quick thank you to the AWS team, to Sarah, to Mo, and to Braden. And I wanted to give a big thank you to everyone who joined in and asked so many questions, and great chat going on as well. We were just super pleased and we had a lot of fun today.
Absolutely.
Awesome. I had lots of fun too. I think anytime you can take something like SailPoint and add in, Lambda in particular, just like being able to throw some compute on top of what's going on in SailPoint, I think you have a match made in heaven. So I learned a ton, and I'm already good with Event Bridge. So excited to kind of get my hands on this in the future. But yeah, I think. Okay, Colin said happy feelings in there. Happy feelings is very close to one of our sign-offs, which is happy trails. And so, yeah, so I'll let you all 3 pick a sign-off to end the show. So we have happy trails, we have y'all come back now, and we have giddy up. And David, I have to say, you got to change the hat, and you got to give us a giddy
absolutely.
up.
I will give you.
I agree.
Okay, so why don't we get started with Colin? Colin, what's your sign-off?
Y'all come back now.
Welcome back now, live from Cleveland, Ohio. All right, Neil, what's yours?
Happy trails.
Happy trails from Neil here in Austin.
Giddy
David?
up.
Giddy up. There we go. Sarah, what about you?
Happy trails.
Happy trails, and y'all come back now from me, live from Austin as well. Thanks for joining, everyone, and Braden, you can take us off.
Thanks, guys.